So I had the idea to make scales for a knife handle using nylon rope that was soaked in epoxy and crushed in a mold, thinking it would look pretty neat. I cut the rope to about 6 inches long and got a block of maple to make the mold with. I split that in 2 parts and cut a channel in the thicker piece. This was probably my first mistake, making the channel too wide. I really should have made it just wide enough for 1 piece of rope instead of 2. I use masking tape on the ends to make it into a trough so that the resin wouldn't leak out. And then I moved on to my second mistake, using polyester resin instead of epoxy. Of course, I really didn't know that it was a mistake at the time, thinking that it would work just as well as the epoxy. After all, they use that to make fiberglass, and that turns out okay. Anyway, I poured it in and put the rope pieces in and poured more resin on top of those to completely soak them. This may or may not be mistake number 3. The resin I used was older, and I wasn't sure if it was actually good anymore. I figured since this was an experiment, there wasn't much to lose anyway. The next day, the resin that had leaked out was still a bit soft, so I gave it another few days to cure before working on it. I broke it free from the block and cut off one side to clean it up. While cutting the other side, I ran into another problem. I guess the blade was melting the resin and catching, so I lowered the blade for a shallower cut. That was still difficult, but the blade made it through, and I cut the other side the same way. Next mistake, trying to cut it in half. Even with the blade lowered, it still caught on the rope resin mixture. One of the mold blocks just came right off after I finished that cut. I would have thought that the resin would stick like crazy to that. Pushing my luck at the table saw, I made another cut, but as you can see, it really tore up the material. I guess the resin didn't penetrate the rope as well as I expected. More or less just to try to get something out of this that I could possibly use, I tried cutting it on the bandsaw. Finally, some success, it cut through cleanly, so I finished the cut all the way through. In the beginning, I wanted to get 2 thinner pieces from this by cutting it down the middle, but I had to settle for just 1 after tearing up the first half. Smoothing it on the belt sander wasn't going well either. Using an older belt was melting the resin rather than cutting it. It worked a lot better when I put a brand new belt on, but it was tearing out some of the threads from the rope. So I switched to the random orbit sander, and that worked a lot better. Rubbing on some mineral spirits lets me see how it looks when it's finished. Not bad, I guess, but there were loose threads and pits in the resin that ruined the look. Not wanting to give up easily, I mixed up some more resin, epoxy this time, and poured that in on top of it. The next day it was rock hard, and I cut off the excess on the table saw. There's a big difference in how well it cuts, cleanly without grabbing. Then more sanding to remove the bulk of it. The idea is to just firm up the threads and fill the gaps so that I can finish it enough to see if it was actually worth the effort. And here's yet another mistake. I tried to split it free of the wood, thinking it would be as easy as the first one. But as you can see, this side actually stuck. So back to the bandsaw, and then more sanding to clean that up. In the end, I have something that kind of looks interesting, but I don't think I would use it for anything. It was a good learning process, though, and that's often more valuable than actually getting something that you can use. It might be worth doing again, but I would definitely use the epoxy resin this time, and a single piece of rope this time, possibly one that's a different color and not that icky brown.